Hello and welcome to Sim.bc, where it right now is 02. Wow, it just changed, and it is a beautiful, jolly old time outside. Today's going to be a quick one because I want to be out there running around in the sun, having a bit of a feel. Yeah, forgot that Only the most professional standards here at Sim.bc, couldn't you tell? Even though the light wasn't on. Even though this should be a routine by now. Anyway, mates, as I was saying, the personal disposition is probably going to be a bit lower because I want to get in there. I want to get talking about what we're going to discuss today. And what are we going to discuss today? Well, we're going to talk about the Stanford prison experiment. And what is that all about? Well, you remember that we talked about the Milgram experiment as of yesterday with perceived authority. Well, we're kind of going to continue going down the same route. So, without any further ado, mates, let's get into it. So, the Stanford prisoners experiment. It's not the same as the prisoner's dilemma anyway, by the way, not by any means, right? So don't get those two mixed up, because I was at the beginning of this, I was like, oh, it's the same thing as prisoner's dilemma, and then when I looked into it, it was like, wow, they're way different. It's not the same thing at all. No, we're talking about the Stanford prisoner experiment, just to be, set it all straight. So the experiment basically, was a professor taking a couple of students, paying them, a complimentary fee for their involvement in a project, in an experiment, and the experiment was basically taking all of these students down in the basement of Stanford's and letting them, play out a little role play. Some of them were going to be prisoners, while some of them were going to be prison guards. All fine, all dandy. Doesn't sound wrong at all, right? I mean, putting young people in a position where they have some form of authority over other people that they potentially might not like. What can go wrong, am I right? Anyway, so the entire idea, I think, was that they were supposed to be down there for a week, but they only managed to do it for 3 days before it was cancelled by the school. Or it was supposed to be for 2 weeks or a month, but they only were down there for a week because it was cancelled by the school. Anyway, however it was, the general consensus here is that it was cancelled by the ethical committee, I think. Based on that, the students started to behaving in an unethical manner and in a bit of a, distasteful way. So, basically what happened was that the people who were put in charge of being prison guards had a perceived authority in the little group. You see, the different people that were supposed to be inmates, so to say, had no authority. So the people who had the perceived authority could tell them what to do. And of course, this led to them misusing power, and the misuse of power and the exercise of power in a way that it shouldn't be exercised in. Just giving people, power generally corrupts. The idea of absolute power absolutely corrupts. Or corrupts absolutely. Same kind of thing happened here. When people got the idea that they had this perceived authority, they started to using it in such a way that, they had authority. They started to using the authority that they were actually, dealt, so to say, by the experiment. And they were starting to mistreat each other, and it was a horrible psychological, experiment for the people who were in there, or apparently, according to the ethical committee, it was horrible enough for the people involved to actually shut it down before it actually ran its course. Now, what kind of conclusions can we draw from this experiment? A couple of students in a basement with the professor overseeing it all, them saying that, oh, I'm just a prisoner, the other people saying, I am a bit of a prison guard, the prison guards misusing the trust, or either misusing the power that were dealt, and the prisoners, quote-unquote prisoners, right, didn't feel like they had the best of a time. What conclusions can we draw from this? Well, yet again, as a theme, right, from yesterday's video, this idea of perceived authority, that as soon as someone is given authority, people tend to listen to them, because this was kind of what happened. The prisoners listened to their classmates just because they were dealt the position of prison guards. Which I would think is rather astonishing, right? That people actually went along with it at this rate. That people actually felt like, yeah, we can go along with it. We can go along with the role play. Only that's astonishing in my opinion. But given the context, right? Let's say that they've been in there for a while in this basement, in an isolated environment, in a controlled environment, yet as in Milgram's experiment. And they were put into a basement where they were basically in this controlled environment where it was happening all the time. It had a psychological influence, I'd assume, that they actually started to believe in these roles. Not that they were seeing their friends and saying that, wow, you're a prison guard now in my mind, and that's all you are. No, perhaps not. Perhaps they still remember that they were their friends, right? Probably, most likely they did. But simultaneously, they actually acted in accordance with the authority that was given to them. Kind of what's happened if you were in a management team and you have a manager above you. That manager quits and one of your friends takes the position, and all of a sudden you're friends, but this person is still in a perceived amount of authority in comparison to you, or in this case they would probably be an authority in comparison to you if they're taking the management position over you. That would still create a different kind of dynamic than your friendship, right? This authority-driven dynamic and this authority-driven relationship between the two of you at work. That was kind of what is happening during the basement test, so to say. During the basement test. They should have called it the basement test. Anyway, we're drawing the conclusion here. We're coming to the conclusion that based on perceived authority, people are really giving up all of their own ideas, right? They're really giving into listening to people just as long as they have this, yet again, perceived authority. Because sure, the experiment said that you're guys are going to be prison guards, but they were still students. I mean, if you think about it, right? Sure, that we're gonna be in a role play, that we're gonna be having a bit of fun trying to actually evaluate the situation. But simultaneously, just because these students who were named prison guards had the perceived authority by the group as of in that controlled environment, perhaps they hadn't had it before, it totally changed the dynamic of the group, and people were actually listening into these people. They were, what should we say? They were trying to preach to them, trying to they were like trying to appeal to their good side, so to say, or they were really trying to get in favor of this figure that held the perceived authority. So yet again, the idea of perceived authority and the idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely, or absolutely corrupt, however you say it, Mike. I know I'm like 90% there in the saying, but I'm not really sure what it is. But you know what saying I'm referring to. But the idea that perceived authority actually has some sort of bearance in any context, which it seems that it's likely, right? That as long as we're talking about people, we're talking about an authority figure, that authority figure has a lot of influence in the group and actually shapes the behavior and the dynamic of that relationship the relationship of the entire group. Is kind of interesting now, isn't it? And sure, this is something that has been drawn from the experiment in and within itself. And sure, different parallels has been drawn between this experiment and evil in the past. However, we're gonna try and do it again, because the more people who arrive at the same sort of conclusions, the better, because it probably means that it has some sort of bearing, right? Some sort of logical reasoning that we're actually following, all of us, right? And if I'm coming up with a new one, then, well, you're going to see that there are new ways you can think about the same perspective, right? New perspectives, rather, that you can think about the same problem. So, my opinion about this project, or about this little experiment when it comes to the conjunction of perceived authority and evil, is, as we talked about yesterday, this perceived authority that people tend to yet again appeal to, that people tend to appeal to these people. Where does the evil lie, so to say? Where is the evil laying in this situation? Because in yesterday's video, where we're talking about that there was one person telling another one what to do. So this authority figure was preaching, so to say, was preaching an opinion, was saying that we're gonna do this, and then the other person was actually the one executing the act. However, in this situation, we have prison guards who are misusing their power, which is making it a lot clearer who is the evil person here. So the evil person, one can argue, is the professor who put them into this situation to begin with, that it's an unnatural situation for students to be in, and this authority was not supposed to be given to them. Hence, you can actually not draw any conclusions at all from this experiment, because since it was in such a controlled environment with variable actors that didn't actually have the bearing or the experience of the field, you can't actually say that this is how other people will actually act in the same situation. I can understand that criticism, right? But that's not the way we're going to go about this. We're going to say that this experience is absolute and it's a good generalization of the entire population of people that will be put into this situation. Which is kind of what it was trying to say as well, that no matter who you put into this situation, the authority will come to, people will come to appeal to the people in authority positions, no matter who is in there, and, authority will still rule. Or at least that is my take of the experiment, that no matter who is in there, it's still going to be kind of the same outcome of it. But then you talk about the evil, and in this situation, right, we have one person or a couple of people who are in this authority position, right? And we can't say that everybody who is in an authority position is evil, because that would be ludicrous. That would be crazy and mental. I mean, just imagine saying that all the various CEOs of all companies in the world are evil. I mean, that would be such a ludicrous statement. I mean, sure, some of them probably are, but most of them, probably aren't. Most of them are probably really good people, because imagine, they've come to the top for some reason, right? Probably because of good people skills and good skills overall, and a good branding, right, for the entire company and the entire corporation. So we can't draw the conclusion from this experiment that all of the people who are in any form of authority situation, in any form of authority position, are actually evil. That's ludicrous, right? Yet again, it's something that we just can't say, and it would be a really hard generalization that I'd say generally is wrong as well. But what I can say, what I think we all can say, is that if you put someone who doesn't have the relevant experience or the relevant education for this, it could be an education based on, a formal university education, a formal high school education for that matter, a former work-related education, or just someone who has the experience and had been educated, so to say, by life, right? Have been put into a situation in where they have learned to control this sort of environment. If you put people in an authority position who haven't been through this, it's not going to yield the best results. And since it's not going to yield the best sort of results, people can say that, well, they're actually misusing their power of authority right here, and that is what leads them down an evil path, and that is what makes it evil. However, we need to take into the consideration that, I mean, really, in this sort of situation, in this type of situation, sure, some people are going to handle it worse than others. And I still stand by the statement that, well, in general, this is probably a good generalization and a good representation of what the general people would do, putting into this kind of situation. However, if you put the right people into this situation, so to say, the people who actually do know how to, work with authority, if you had real prison guards actually put in there, the dynamic would look completely different, or at least I think so, right, in my opinion. So it isn't really the basis of someone being put into a position of authority that is the problem. It's putting the wrong people in a position where they're having the authority, which develops a behavior which can be seen as evil, but really it isn't evil. It's just a misuse of the authority that they've been given, and the lack of understanding of, well, how do I actually utilize this in a good way? Because I assume that most people have the best of intentions, right, and most of the times, but this can still be perceived as evil by many people. Why? Well, because they don't have the relevant experience. They don't know how to utilize it, how to use it, what to do, which is kind of interesting in my opinion, right? So I would argue that in this sort of situation, no matter what other people are saying, that, people are inherently evil and all of that, as can be shown by this experiment because people actually misuse their authority, I would argue that no, it's just that some people just don't know how to use the authority if it's like formally given, right? If it's like a popular leader in a group, that is like a natural progression of authority. If you are a manager at work, then hopefully most of the time you have some sort of educational experience, right? That supported this claim that you're in a leadership position. However, if someone comes along and tells you, right, that you're now in charge of this group of people, and you've never been in charge of these group of people before, you don't know who they are, you don't know why, you don't know anything about it, and you haven't been in any form of similar situation before, then that is just a lack of your understanding of how to utilize this position in the best way, which will make you perhaps take some decisions that are seen as evil and seen as really bad and unnecessarily bad and cruel, but that is just based that you don't actually know what you're going to do in this situation. So it's a really interesting discussion that can be had around this experiment alone. right? That people are either inherently evil, which I don't tend to agree with, but I can see the critique, I can see where this is coming from. However, I would argue that just the lack of knowledge and lack of experience within that sort of position that makes the given authority being misrepresented. Yet again, if you put a general person in here that doesn't have that experience, because we can assume that in general people don't, then this is going to be the representation as this group or as this experiment provided, right? The results of this experiment is going to be the same no matter who you put in there if you put in the general populace, right? But if you put in the right people, this is not going to happen. If you put in the wrong people who actually have a negative mindset and a very harmful way of thinking, it's going to be even worse. I am just saying that connecting this to evil, it depends on who you put into the situation. Put the right people in, it's going to be no problem at all that you have this perceived authority, because it's going to be a legitimized authority based on that they actually knew what they're going to do, and this given authority is going to be translated into, well, given authority based on the group, that the group are actually going to understand that these people are rather good in this kind of position. We're actually gonna listen to them. However, if you have the people who are not that familiar with the situation, people are going to probably try and overthrow them and establish their own popular leaders, right, who has the legitimized authority but not the given one, which will create a kind of a problem in between their kind of issues, yeah, and that will later on create different conflicts that will perhaps develop into, depending on whose perspective and whose side you're on, develop into an idea, well, that was actually an evil act, no, that was an evil act, and then the people will be controversial, and that will just bring on about more stuff that we can't actually even talk about now, because we're all theory crafting, right, and based on a given case that we're just talking about. Anyway, that was rambly, I get that. Basis is, given authority, probably kind of bad. Given authority to the right kind of people, which makes it legitimized authority based on their behavior, probably really good. Does it have anything to do with evil, really? I would argue no, but many people would argue it does. Yet again, trying to appeal to the idea that people are inherently evil. I would tend to say, no, they're not. It's just based on their understanding of the situation they're in this case anyway, right? So, that was everything for me today, mates. Have a nice one, and I'm gonna come at you, yeah, with a bit of an Easter video tomorrow in the SNR. It's gonna be a culinary experience. It's gonna be a food experience. Here I am trying with fancy terminology, and you see how it goes. Anyway, mates, see ya tomorrow.